Chapter 1469. Looking at the figure that suddenly appeared in front of him, Nan Muyang was obviously a little surprised. Could it be that this young master of the Ling people was a brute? It was impossible for him not to feel his power being devoured, and it was impossible for him not to notice the changes in his body. However, he seemed to be fearless and still rushed over in such a rude and unreasonable manner. Nan Muyun shook his head and smiled, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Since that's the case, young Master Ling Xiao, I'll accept your gift. Boom! The terrifying black light completely exploded. At this time, Nan Muyun had already activated his devouring power to the limit. As Ling Xiao's punch landed, his figure flew backward again. Then, before he could completely stabilize himself, he saw the young master of the Ling people's figure strangely appear in front of him. Boom! Another punch. At this time, Nan Muyun did not have the time to breathe at all. In fact, even the power that he had just devoured could not be integrated in time and turned into his own spiritual energy. Suddenly, Nan Muyun seemed to have understood something. This young master of the Ling people was planning to use this method to break his devouring power. Could this be the legendary speed? Is the only thing that is invincible in the world? In front of the main hall, everyone stared dumbfoundedly at the young master of the demon-controlling sect who was being hammered all the way to the ground. Their eyes were full of shock and horror. Especially the few people from the Heavenly Imperial Palace. Their mouths were slightly open, and they could not stop swallowing their saliva. What was an invincible immortal? Previously, when Ling Xiao smashed Xiao Shan's body, they had already seen the terrifying power of this young master. However, at this time, in the face of Nan Muyun's strange method, this young master of the Ling people chose to ignore it directly and completely destroyed all the laws of cultivation. Strong. Too strong. In the face of this absolute power, all methods were in vain. I don't believe it. At this time, Nan Muyun was also extremely sullen. The devouring power outside his body was about to be completely dispersed by Ling Xiao. If this continued, it would not be long before he was completely at a disadvantage. Get out of my way! Nan Muyun bellowed and clenched his fist before he smashed it out. Under his fist, a strange black vortex suddenly appeared and annihilated everything. This power had already completely surpassed the scope of this world. Wherever the fist passed, even space began to collapse and vanish, unable to recover. But just as Nan Muyun's attack was about to land on Ling Xiao, the young man suddenly disappeared from where he stood. This kind of feeling was like punching cotton. It was really sullen to the extreme. Before Nan Muyang could react, another ear-piercing sound was heard from behind him. Pucci, with the might of Ling Xiao's polychoria, he could easily travel through space in a small area. Nan Muyun, on the other hand, had obviously reached the point where he was flustered and exasperated. He only needed to fiddle with him a little more, and this chosen one would completely collapse. Boom! Ling Xiao's fist landed and directly scattered the black spirit light around Nan Muyun. Even the armor on his body was shattered by this tremendous force, revealing his broken back. Nan Muyun's figure once again smashed into the square, raising waves of smoke and dust. Ling Xiao stood in the void with his hands behind his back, his eyes calm. To be honest, this Nan Muyun did have some strength, especially that devouring power, which was really mysterious. If it was an ordinary Saint Stage chosen one, they would have been smashed into pieces by Ling Xiao's several punches. However, at this time, Ling Xiao also had some guesses that Nan Muyun's devouring Dao law should not be so terrifying. This devouring power was probably related to the imperial demon that he had fused with. Roar! At this moment, an angry roar suddenly came from the smoke and dust. Immediately, a black demon shadow broke through the void and directly appeared in front of Ling Xiao. It was a strange demon beast that was pitch black and covered in golden stripes. Its appearance was like a unicorn, with 4 slender legs but a human face. Sharp fangs protruded from its mouth, and there were 4 eyes on its face. At this time, it was just a shadow that stood outside of Nan Muyun, enveloping his entire body. Tao Tai. With just one look, Ling Xiao knew the origin of this fierce demon. No wonder this Imperial Demon Clan young master could comprehend such a terrifying Dao law of devouring. It turned out that the Imperial Demon that he had contracted was this ancient fierce beast, Tao Tai. Roar! Nan Miyun's hands formed a seal, and the Tao Tai great demon above his head also stretched out two claws, clenching them like a human hand, and brazenly pressed down on Ling Xiao. Seeing this, Ling Xiao's eyes were calm. With a shift of his mind, a ray of golden light suddenly rose from the top of his head, turning into a dragon shadow that was 100 feet long, standing between heaven and earth, overlooking the vast sea. An indescribably terrifying demonic aura fell from the sky, instantly causing all the demons present to tense up and want to kneel on the ground. Especially the few disciples of the Imperial Demon Clan. At this time, they were even more flustered and frightened. Their bodies went soft, and because they were not careful, Xin Yuan Weiyang's halberd swept across and smashed their bodies. Nan Miyun's face almost instantly turned blank. Even the Tao Tai inside his body showed signs of trembling. Never in his dreams did he expect that this Ling people's young master would have such pure dragon power in his body. Moreover, this dragon power was not something that the mixed blood dragons in the Azure world could compare to. This was the true ancestral dragon's power. How is this possible? Everyone knew that at the end of the Eldritch Age, the ancestral dragon wreaked havoc and almost devoured the heavenly Tao. In the end, he was killed by the joint forces of thousands of tribes. Since then, he had turned into 10 ancestral dragon bloodlines and was no longer as powerful as before. Even these 10 ancestral dragons were slaughtered by the powerful cultivators of various tribes for the heavenly Tao's Saint Luck in their bodies. Not to mention the Azure world, even in the immortal realm, it was hard to say if there were any ancestral dragon bloodlines left. Could it be the Ling people? Nan Muyun frowned. At this time, it was useless to worry too much. He circulated all the spiritual energy in his body and poured it into the Tao Hie's shadow. Buzz! Suddenly, the world turned dark and Tao patterns appeared. A devouring spiritual spiral appeared under each of the Tao Hie's claws and pressed toward Ling Xiao. Seeing this, Ling Xiao's lips curled into a smile. Golden scales appeared on his arms. He also stretched out two palms and collided with Nan Muyun. At this time, in front of Qin Daoyan, he did not use the power of the Sky Demon. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if this heavenly imperial mansion elder saw through it. Rumble! The moment the two attacks collided, the entire blood feather sacred mountain collapsed. Countless figures fled one after another. Their eyes were filled with shock. In the void, a dragon and a beast stood in the sky and let out a deafening roar. The ancestral dragon versus the Tao Tai. Such a visual impact almost caused the Tao hearts of many God Emperor disciples to crumble on the spot. Chapter 1470. Boundless ripples surged out in all directions, destroying all the mountains and forests it came into contact with. The vast demonic aura swept across thousands of miles, shaking heaven and earth. Just as everyone was looking at the top of the sky in fear, they saw a figure once again flying backwards in a sorry state. Blood spurted out, and both of his arms were actually broken. At this time, the Tao Hie's shadow around Nan Muyun had already dissipated, revealing his almost broken body. He looked extremely miserable. His face was also filled with fear and anger, and he was no longer as calm as before. However, before Nan Muyun's figure landed on the ground, a black-robed figure stepped down from the sky. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he looked like an immortal. Compared to Nan Muyun's sorry state, Ling Xiao's current demeanor was otherworldly, and there was not a trace of uneasiness at all. It was as if in front of this young master of the Ling people, the 100 great talents and the ancient ferocious beasts were all nothing. Even Hua Sun, who was trapped in the ice prison, was in a daze. Hua! Her heart trembled slightly, and she almost collapsed. She had already guessed the reason why Yi Qingshan did not kill her. No matter what identity Ling Xiao had, he was probably more honorable than the young master of the demon-controlling sect. This could be clearly seen from his appearance and temperament. Most of these young masters and young masters from the upper realm were here for the sinful, immortal ruins. She would soon become this black-robed young master's servant and lead him to find the other bronze fragments. This was an opportunity, but she would also bear the crime of betraying the Demon King Palace and the demon-controlling sect. Suddenly, Huasun's clothes were drenched in cold sweat. Young Master Nanmuyun, it looks like you've lost this time. Ling Xiao stepped down from the sky and looked down at Nanmuyun. He gently clenched his hand, and he was about to kill this chosen one. No, I didn't lose. How can I lose? Nanmuyun's eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth, and two bloody eyes suddenly opened on his forehead. It was extremely strange. His entire body suddenly expanded, revealing his fangs and fur, and he turned into a half-demon, half-human form. The true strength of the demon control sect lay in the fusion of human and demon powers. It was obvious that Nanmuyun, who was at the end of his rope, had finally revealed his most powerful technique. Buzz! Boundless black light soared into the sky like a curtain of night, enveloping heaven and earth. Some of the weaker Immortal Form sect disciples were sucked in by an invisible force and were directly swallowed into nothingness. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to use his polychoria to retreat, he realized that the entire space was engulfed by the devouring power. Whether it was Taoist laws, spiritual power, or spiritual power, as long as they were used, they would be devoured immediately. Ling Xiao, no matter how strong you are, you will only become my stepping stone and nourishment on my path to becoming a martial emperor. Once I devour you, all of your power will be mine. Nanmuyun laughed wildly, his rationality completely overshadowed by his ferocious nature. The reason why he didn't take out this demonic body immediately was because this big, ancient demon's ferocious nature was too terrifying. When the two powers merged, his temperament would more or less be affected. Besides him and Ling Xiao, there's also a group of people from the Heavenly Imperial Palace. Once, if he really unleashed his murderous nature, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, he couldn't care less. He didn't want to care about anything else. He just wanted to devour this arrogant young man and obtain all of his power to wash away his humiliation. Roar! Nanmuyun roared into the sky. The black curtain above his head suddenly fell and instantly enveloped the entire space where Ling Xiao was. The terrifying, devouring power surged wildly and directly devoured the entire space into nothingness. Even light and spiritual energy were all annihilated in one breath. This was a forbidden land for living beings. This, seeing the two figures disappear at the same time, Chun Daoyan and the other's eyes trembled. They wanted to say something, but stopped. What the F***CK? Isn't this over? Ling People's young master was killed by the young master of the demon control sect? Once this news spread to the Azure world, do you think the Ling people will directly attack and destroy the demon control sect? Even as onlookers, they would probably be implicated as well. Clan leader Qin Chan, do you want it? Chun Daoyan turned his head and looked at Yi Qin Chan and the other two girls who fell from the sky. His lips trembled slightly. He didn't know why, but when he looked at the three girls, except for Princess Xianyuan, who was obviously worried, Yi Qin Chan and Su Yin didn't seem to be worried at all. No need. It's just a sage. Yi Qin Chan shook her head. Based on her understanding of Ling Xiao, it was impossible for him to be defeated by someone of the same generation as him. There were many invincible people in the world, mostly because they had never met their young master. Her young master could be said to be invincible in the world. All right. Chun Daoyan's lips trembled slightly. In the end, he didn't say anything more. Instead, he looked up at the sky. At this time, the black curtain had already turned into clouds. It vaguely looked like the fierce shadow of a Tao Tai, filled with an ancient ferocity. Within the black curtain, Ling Xiao coldly looked at the terrifying demon in the distance. There was no trace of emotion in his eyes. Ling Xiao. Nan Muyun smiled sinisterly. His eyes were extremely evil. He was completely different from the image of a cultured and elegant young master. At this time, all four of his eyes were blood red and looked extremely sinister. Once you fall into my Tao Tai realm, even if you're at the peak of the Sage realm, you will be devoured into nothingness. Before I completely lose my mind, it may not be too late for you to admit defeat now. Your Tao Tai realm can devour any kind of power? Ling Xiao frowned slightly. He seemed to be somewhat puzzled. Ha ha ha, fear. In here, all forms of power will become my nourishment. Soul power, spiritual power, and even the power of essence and blood. The power of essence and blood is so terrifying. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. He was still somewhat puzzled. You're at the first level of the Sage realm, but you should have more than one Saint rune, right? That's right. Ling Xiao, to tell you the truth, I have a total of 5 Saint runes in my Elixir C. So, let alone you, no one in the Azure world can be my opponent. Nan Muyun laughed wildly. His eyes were filled with the joy of revenge. Oh, 5 Saint runes. As everyone knew, some false saints, no matter what level they broke through, would only have 1 Saint rune in their lifetime. If one wanted to enter the honorable state, one would need to condense at least 9 Saint runes. Ordinary geniuses would try to condense 1 Saint rune when they broke through to the first level. In the end, they would reach the honorable state with 9 Saint runes. Some monstrous geniuses would borrow the power of heaven and earth to condense as many Saint runes as possible when they entered the Sage realm. First level of the Sage realm, 5 Saint runes. It was indeed a supreme talent. However, compared to Ling Xiao, it was really not worth mentioning. I think you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Seeing Ling Xiao's calm expression, Nan Muyun could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. The moment his eyes changed, a terrifying, devouring power rushed out. In a breath's time, the entire great world was filled with mighty spiritual power. 10,000 Tao no longer existed. Chapter 1471. Buzz. The vast divine power almost swallowed a black hole in the void, as if it was connected to another unknown world. The wind and clouds within thousands of miles turned into a vortex and gathered in the mouth of the Tao Tai shadow. At this time, even the people in front of the main hall felt a terrifying, devouring power spreading from the sky, robbing all the vitality and spiritual aura. It was easy to imagine what kind of apocalyptic scene it was inside the body of the fierce shadow. Ling Xiao, you forced me to do this. Nan Muyun's eyes were scarlet and fierce. At this time, he had completely merged with the Tao Tai realm and was devouring the spiritual power in Ling Xiao's body. Moreover, he could clearly see the fluctuations of spiritual power circulating around the youth's body. Delicious. Too delicious. Who would have thought that the young master of the Ling people, who is known as the invincible young master of the world, would be defeated by him in such a miserable way? Since you want to devour, I'll let you devour as much as you want. However, in the face of such a terrifying power, Ling Xiao's face was still calm. Then he suddenly opened his soul sea and elixir sea and took the initiative to let go of all his defenses. In an instant, long rivers of spiritual power meandered out and filled the world. The boundless soul light lit up the sky, illuminating the space inside the Tao Tai shadow as bright as day. In just a moment, Nan Muyun's expression became dull. At this time, he seemed to see the sacred runes quietly lighting up on a young man's elixir sea. 1, 2, 3, 81 sacred runes. How is this possible? An indescribably terrifying aura surged into his body like a tidal wave. 81 sacred runes. A sovereign divine soul. How is this possible? How absurd. At this time, Nan Muyun was completely stunned. He frowned at the young man in front of him, feeling that all of this was just an illusion. It was so shocking that it was beyond what he could accept. If all of this was real, Ling Xiao could not be a human at all. Even an immortal could not condense 81 sacred runes. In the billions of eras of heaven and earth, there had never been a monster who could condense 81 sacred runes. This did not make sense. Boom! As the spiritual power entered his body, Nen Muyun's body suddenly expanded. Even though he had merged with the Tao Tai's divine power, he was still in the Sage Realm. The range that he could withstand was only in the Sage Realm. Ling Xiao was naturally aware of this. However, all Heaven's Mandate cultivators had terrifying trump cards that could allow them to surpass their cultivation realms to kill their enemies and turn the tables around to slap their own faces. However, this trump card must have its limits. If there were no restrictions, there would be no ups and downs. How could there be a high point in the plot? Gao Chao, as the name implies, has to rise, fall again and again, rise step by step, and finally reach the peak. With Nan Muyun's level of cultivation, he might have been able to trap or even devour someone at the peak of the Saint Plane. However, although Ling Xiao's strength was not at the peak level, the spiritual energy in his body was not something that a saint could compare to. Boom, boom. Divine might surged and was endlessly devoured by the realm, which then merged into Nan Muyun's body. In just a short moment, the latter's body had already surpassed its limits. It was like a meatball that could collapse at any time. Stop! Stop! Ling Xiao, I admit defeat. At this moment, Nan Muyun finally understood how ridiculous his previous thoughts were. Perhaps, from the beginning to the end, in the eyes of this young master of the Ling people, he was an insignificant clown. Crushing. They were not on the same level at all. Young master, I'm willing to submit. Please, spare. Submit. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and seemed to be pondering. However, the moment Nan Muyun relaxed his mind, he saw the spiritual light outside the young man's body suddenly flourish and burst his physical body and divine soul into pieces. Beep! Congratulations to the host for successfully using the Luck Plundering Talisman. You have gained 14,000 luck points and 140,000 villain points. Beep! Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. You have obtained an additional reward, Devouring Principle. Beep! Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. You have obtained an additional reward, one chance to perfect the principle. Devouring Principle, perfect. Ling Xiao stood in the void with his hands behind his back. His eyes were indifferent as he looked at the Tao Tai realm that was about to shatter. In his hand, he was holding a bronze fragment. The immortal charm on it was unrestrained and contained supreme mystery. It was not that subduing the young master of the demon-controlling sect was not beneficial to him. On the contrary, controlling him was equivalent to controlling the future of the demon-controlling sect. However, Ling Xiao had no idea how long it would take for this future to arrive. Now that the great era had arrived and the world was in chaos, it was obvious that he did not have much patience to wait for Nan Muyun to grow. Moreover, the devouring principle was too tempting. In Ling Xiao's opinion, controlling this power in his own hands was far more valuable than the demon-controlling sect. Therefore, Nan Muyun was dead. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. Then, everyone was stunned to see that the fierce shadow of the Tao Tai that originally shrouded the sky was suddenly pierced by a ray of divine light. At first, it was only a ray of dazzling brilliance. Then, thousands of rays of divine light bloomed in the sky, shattering the black curtain and illuminating the world. The blazing brilliance directly blocked everyone's vision, and they subconsciously lowered their heads. Soon, the world returned to calm, and the divine light and black light disappeared. A black-robed figure stood in the sky and slowly walked over. At this time, there was not the slightest bit of dispiritedness on his body. There was not even a trace of injury. He was calm and composed. The young master of the demon-controlling sect, who was originally fighting with him, had disappeared without a trace. This, Chen Dunyin and the others narrowed their eyes, but they all had guesses in their hearts. It was obvious that after using such a trump card, this battle could only be a situation where one side would not stop until one side was dead. Since Master Ling Xiao was safe and sound, it could only mean that Nan Muyun was dead. Buzz. With a thought, Ling Xiao put the 100 swords into the 1,000-weapon Tao scripture. Then he waved his hand and caught the mountain seed divine demon painting that fell from the sky. Only then did he land in front of everyone. Young master, Yi Qing-chan and the others immediately gathered around with smiles in their eyes. Yi Qing-chan, in particular, hugged Ling Xiao's arm, her eyes full of concern. Yes, she did not believe that there was anyone in the world who could defeat Ling Xiao. However, it did not mean that she was not worried. Even the slightest injury was enough to make her heart ache. I'm fine. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and handed the Mountain Sea Divine Demon painting to Yi Qing-chan. Then he looked up at Hua Sun, who was trapped in the ice prison, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Yi Qing-chan immediately understood. She waved her jade-like hand and shattered the ice prison. Plop! At this time, Hua Sun was no longer as calm as before. Although she had guessed that Nan Muyun would lose this battle, she did not expect that he would be beaten to a pulp. What did this mean? It meant that the young man in front of her was not afraid of the demon-controlling sect's revenge at all. Hiss. Chapter 1472. You're the saintess of the Demon King Palace? Ling Xiao walked up to the girl kneeling on the ground and asked calmly. I used to be. Hua Sun's bright eyes trembled, showing a hint of submission. Oh, give me a reason not to kill you. Ling Xiao nodded and smiled. He liked to deal with smart people. It was obvious that Hua Sun already had the intention to submit to him. Of course, to Ling Xiao now, a girl with 7,000 providence was no longer worth his time and effort to play with. However, he was interested in the girl's ability. Young master, I'm Hua Sun. I'm a flower fairy, and I'm very sensitive to auras. So, if you're looking for something, young master, I can help you. Hua Sun pursed her red lips and put on a pitiful look. Oh, sensitive to auras? Ling Xiao shook his head. He wanted to find the bronze fragment, but his method was much simpler and more direct than Hua Sun's. Such a treasure that was related to the secrets of heaven and earth would definitely be in the hands of the destined person. No matter how crowded the crowd was, Ling Xiao could always see the golden figure in the crowd. On the other hand, Hua Sun had to be close to the bronze fragment to sense its existence. So, this reason was not enough. Seeing that Ling Xiao was unmoved, Hua Sun's hair was instantly wet and cold sweat broke out. Young master, the talent of the Flower Fairy clan is to nurture plants. My spiritual energy is very good for nurturing plants. Also, I can collect the essence of plants and turn it into a spiritual source. Oh, nurturing plants? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and nodded gently under Hua Sun's horrified gaze. Then you can follow me. This talent was similar to Han Zhan's immortal tablet. However, Ling Xiao guessed that Hua Sun's ability was probably not as good as Han Zhan's. However, who would mind having a hard-working gardener in their garden? What's more, this little butterfly was witty and sensible. Wouldn't it be nice to keep her in captivity and watch her collect honey when she was free? That pair of small wings, it must be very hard to pull it, right? Thank you, young master. Many thanks, young master. Hua Sun cried tears of joy. His cheeks were red, and it was hard to tell if he was sad or happy. Young master, after meeting you, I realized that the place with the most water in the world is not the ocean. Beep. Congratulations to the host for gaining the allegiance of the Daughter of Destiny. Received 7,000 luck points and 70,000 villain points. Hee hee. Congratulations to young master for obtaining another good servant. Chun Daoyan and the others came from afar and bowed to Ling Xiao. At this moment, the elder of the heavenly imperial manor no longer had the cold arrogance he had when they first met. Instead, he was extremely humble. Elder Chun, thank you for your hard work. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. With the power he controlled, it was enough to kill this elder of the heavenly imperial residence. However, there was no need for that. Whether it was Qiao Shan's death or Nan Muyun's death, it seemed that they deserved it. Ling Xiao could not be blamed at all. On the contrary, if he was alive, the world would know what happened in the lower bound and how Ling Xiao was so righteous and unwavering in fighting against the demons. Look, Xiao Shan colluded with the sinners and was killed by Master Ling Xiao. If the young master wanted to hide the truth, he could have just killed these disciples of the heavenly imperial residence. However, he did not. What did that mean? It meant that the young master was magnanimous. He was open and upright. He did not let any demons go. But he also did not wrong a good person. Wasn't that bragging? Of course, with Chun Danyan's temperament. After seeing how terrifying Ling Xiao was, he did not dare to make the heavenly imperial residence his enemy. Therefore, when he returned to Qing Song, it was more likely that he would push all the blame onto the dead Xiao Shan and use this opportunity to curry favor with the Ling people, so that the young master of the Ling people would not use this as an excuse to cause trouble for the heavenly imperial residence. This was what they meant by the weak are unreasonable. Not at all, not at all. The young master has personally eradicated the demons and purified the demoness. I really admire you. I have decided that when I return to Qing Song, I will report everything that happened here to the mansion master and punish Xiao Shan severely. Chun Danyan hurriedly shook his head with a serious expression. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, smiled and shook his head. There is no need for that. I did not kill demons for fame. I just wanted to protect the justice of the world. I believe that justice is in the hearts of the people. Young master is righteous. Hearing that, Chun Danyan's old face trembled. He suddenly bowed to Ling Xiao. All right, this trip is considered complete. The Blood Feather tribe has been eradicated. Elder, shall we meet again? Ling Xiao's expression was gentle and natural. There was no trace of deliberate intention at all. Meet again? I originally wanted to continue basking in the light of righteousness with you, but, oh, if that is the case, we shall not disturb you any further. Young master, until we meet again. Chun Danyan's eyes narrowed. He wished he could slap himself. He hurriedly bowed to Ling Xiao and turned around to call the heavenly imperial residence disciples to fly away. It was as if he was afraid that Ling Xiao would go back on his words. Puffed. Seeing that, Xianyuan Weiyang sneered. But when he saw the solemn faces of Yi Qingchan, Su Yin, and the others, he immediately blushed. He hurriedly lowered his head and looked nervously at Ling Xiao. Fortunately, the young master was not angry. That's right, that's right. Elder Chen's behavior was too funny. He was obviously scared to death, but he pretended that he did not want to leave. Sect leader Hua, go and look through the treasury of the Blood Feather tribe. Take it as a reward for this trip to the Immortal Form sect. Ling Xiao said indifferently as he looked up at the sky. It had been a few days since he came to the lower domain. He wondered how lively Qing Song would be now. Those monsters who had lost their respect should take this opportunity to take the stage. Ling Xiao only needed to give them some time to perform. When he returned to Qing Song, he would know who was boss and who was ghost. Thank you, young master. Are you planning to leave? The Immortal Form sect leader hesitated. Yes, Feng Prefecture and Ning Prefecture are already stable. It's time for me to go to other places. Ling Xiao nodded. He had already arrived in 3 of the 9 prefectures. Now that he thought about it, the other 6 prefectures were already in turmoil. As time passed, whether it was the heavenly fate of this world or the monstrous geniuses from the upper domain, they would most likely know about the existence of the bronze shards. Under such circumstances, the heavenly fate would most likely kill each other. It was time to cut them off. As for the Blood Feather tribe's foundation, it was a sinful tribe. When they were suppressed in the lower domain, their foundation had probably been taken away by the Realm Lord. Even if they had some foundation, it would be a pile of scrap metal that was not worth mentioning. After all, this tribe did not have any providence. It was difficult for them to have any opportunities. Young master, this old servant has a presumptuous request. The Immortal Form sect leader suddenly bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. Since it's a presumptuous request, there's no need to say it. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao directly raised his leg and summoned the dragon carriage. He hugged Yi Qingchan and Su Yin as they sat in the carriage, their expressions languid. As for Xinyuan Weiyang, she was pouting slightly as she sat at the side resentfully, her brows filled with disappointment. "Oomph. Sister Qinchan, you don't mean what you say? You said that you would take the initiative to create opportunities for me, but every time? Oomph. Hua Sun, you drive the carriage." "Yes, young master." Roar. The wind and clouds suddenly changed. The golden dragon soared into the sky and flew towards the distant mountains. Chapter 1473. Sigh. The immortal form sect master stood up and sighed softly after the dragon carriage disappeared into the distance. His presumptuous request, just now, was actually not for himself, but for Hua Fei'er. Young Master Ling Xiao had many beauties by his side. In the immortal form sect master's opinion, Hua Fei'er was one of them as well. Not to mention that Hua Sun had been taken in as a servant by his side. Hua Fei'er was indeed not as beautiful as Yi Qingchan, but she was still one of the top beauties in the human race. She should be fine as a servant, right? But the young master did not even give him a chance to speak. Of course, the immortal form sect master could not figure it out no matter how hard he racked his brains. A girl with no luck, ordinary talent, and an ordinary background had no value at all. Father. In the crowd, Hua Fei'er also had a disappointed look on her face. However, she was mentally prepared. But what else could she ask for? Without the young master, she would have died in Lin Yan's hands, and the entire immortal form sect would have been destroyed by the blood feather race. Therefore, meeting Ling Xiao was already a blessing for Hua Fei'er. Let's go and see if there are any treasures in the blood feather race that Fei'er likes. The immortal form sect master laughed heartily and led Hua Fei'er to the mountain behind the blood feather race. At the same time, in the sky above, Ling Xiao held a jade cup and sipped the spirit wine. Not bad. This spirit wine made from the essence of plants is indeed a little strange. Hua Sun, do you know where I can find the bronze fragments? Young master, I don't have any at the moment, but Hua Sun hesitated with a nervous expression. On my way to the blood feather race, I heard that there was a strange phenomenon at the Dead Spirit Reef. Oh, the Dead Spirit Reef? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows with a faint smile. Just from a name alone, one could tell that it was a dangerous place. Furthermore, places like this always hid great fortunes. Yes, it is said that this place is the place where an evil cultivator secluded himself. There are countless dead souls there, but Hua Sun's eyes flickered with fear. When the sacred emperor unified the Shengzhou, he used his divine power to seal this place. It has been thousands of years since anything happened. Sealed by the sage emperor? Ling Xiao nodded lightly, and he increasingly felt that this Dead Spirit Reef was definitely not ordinary. Tell me more about the Dead Soul Reef. Yes, young master, this forbidden area is located in the Sea of Ghosts at the border of the Ocean Province, and it is publicly acknowledged as a forbidden area in the 9 prefectures. Hua Sun's voice was dignified. Although the Demon King's palace was a force, it was the holy land in the eyes of the demon clans all over the 9 regions. Therefore, he had some understanding of the secrets of the 9 prefectures. Now that Hua Sun had chosen to betray the demon-controlling sect, she naturally had to work hard to be Ling Xiao's maidservant. The more valuable she was, the more likely she would be appreciated by the young master. Of course, although the ocean continent is not as prosperous as the Ning continent, there are still many forces there. Among them, the Yaoyu ancient dynasty is the strongest force in the ocean continent. The monarch of this ancient dynasty is a woman. She is extremely domineering, and her cultivation is terrifying. But what? However, a year ago, this empress suddenly married a mortal as her husband. This is really surprising. Empress? A mortal as her husband? Hearing this, Ling Xiao's face blossomed into a smile. It was not that he was interested in this empress. How could a mere empress of a lower realm be compared to Gu Chao Ci? However, this mortal as her husband was somewhat interesting. It was said that recently, a group of Heaven's Mandate had been hiding in the Emperor's palace, and they were secretly invincible. It's not that I can't live off a woman, but I, Ling Xiao, am not convinced that they are invincible. Is this reason sufficient? That's right. This husband of the Yao Yu Empress is really thick-skinned. It is said that he spends all his time in the palace, eating and waiting for death. No matter how much people humiliate him, he never gets angry. Huasun shook her head and smiled. She would never have thought that the person she was mocking might be the strongest heaven's mandate in the 9 prefectures. Let's go to the Yao Yu ancient dynasty and meet this Yao Yu Empress and her useless husband. Ling Xiao smiled. Before this useless husband of hers revealed his true identity, there would be no real feelings between the two of them. In other words, the emotional transition would usually occur after this empress husband revealed his true strength. Damn, my husband is so awesome. The empress was no longer domineering. Instead, she became gentle and docile. This was the perfect reversal of the plot. However, in this lower realm, this son of heaven's mandate would not surpass the saint realm. How could he compete with Ling Xiao? Yes, young master. Huasun steered the chariot toward Ocean Province. Ling Xiao suddenly thought of something and said calmly, "By the way, Huasun, how many saints does the Yao Yu Palace have?" "Young master, there are 5 saint realm experts in the Demon King Palace. The strongest one is Old Ancestor Golden Lion, who is at the 7th level of the saint realm. The other 4 elders are at the 3rd or 4th level of the saint realm. However, Elder Qing Peng has already been." Huasun smiled awkwardly. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and her eyes narrowed. 7th level, saint realm. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and said no more. Meanwhile, in the realm, Ling Xiao's Taoist body stood in the heavenly palace with his hands behind his back. In front of him stood Xiong Huan, Shi Patian, Brute Devil, and Folded Shadow. The 4 of them were all at the saint realm, and their combat strength was terrifying. They could even fight the peak saints of the upper world, let alone the fake saints of the 9 prefectures. Since the Yao Yu Palace belonged to the Yao Yu sect, Ling Xiao had no intention of letting them go. "The 4 of you, go to the Yao Yu Palace and wipe out this sect," Ling Xiao said indifferently. Xiong Huan and the other 3 immediately bowed. "Yes, my lord. By the way, Folded Shadow, how's the training of the hidden guards?" "My lord, they can act alone now." Folded Shadow bowed. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. "Take them with you. They will be responsible for hunting down the experts of the Yao Yu Palace. You will provide support from the side. Xiong Huan will stay behind." "Yes." The 4 of them bowed once more before turning around and disappearing. Although the strength of these secret guards was mostly at the exalted realm, they should know how to conceal themselves and assassinate opponents who were stronger than them. The Yao Yu Palace was a good stepping stone to help them transcend themselves and become the true masters of the hidden path. Of course, some of them would die in the process. This was why Ling Xiao chose the Yao Yu Palace. In the lower world, the death of the hidden guards would not bring much danger to Ling Xiao. Even if the Yao Yu Palace knew Ling Xiao's identity, they would not be able to threaten him. However, once they returned to the Azure Continent, they would face great danger every time they went on a mission. If something went wrong, the consequences would be devastating. This was a test and a crucial battle to determine whether they could become pawns in the upper world. Chapter 1474. Ocean State, Yao Yu Ancient Dynasty. This ancient dynasty was the oldest force in the Ocean State. The empress of this dynasty was called Lung Qianma. She had reached the saint realm at the age of 900. Her talent and appearance were top-notch in the 9 states. She attracted countless strong cultivators to pursue her. What made people feel strange was that the empress, who was known as the most beautiful woman in the 9 provinces, suddenly married a scholar a year ago and gave him the title of free and unfettered king, enjoying unparalleled honor and glory. It would be fine if this scholar came from a famous family or was extremely talented. However, this person had no cultivation and no background. He became the laughingstock of the 9 states. People even gave him the title of 9 states #1 freeloader. When the 2 of them got married, countless strong cultivators came to the imperial court to celebrate. When they saw how useless this person was, they were all furious. Only the Yaoyu Empress seemed to be unaware of it. She was willing to marry him. It was really puzzling. Now, with the appearance of the Dead Souls Reef, some of the sealed evil spirits took the opportunity to come out of the Forbidden Land and wreak havoc. As the first barrier in the 9 states, the Yaoyu ancient dynasty had been invaded by the evil spirits. How was the situation at the front? In the first pass of the Yaoyu ancient dynasty, Shuhai City, a beautiful woman wearing a golden imperial robe and a purple gold phoenix crown stood with her hands behind her back. She looked at the mountain stream in the distance with cold eyes. There, a layer of death chi spread across the sky. It was like a dark cloud that was slowly approaching Shuhai City. Emperor, there is an army of dead souls ahead. There are at least 100,000 of them. The leader seems to have a divine consciousness. His aura is extremely terrifying. Beside him, a female general in armor bowed and spoke in a solemn tone. She had been ordered to fight with these evil spirits. In the end, she found that not only were these evil spirits powerful, but they were also difficult to kill. Every time their bodies were shattered by spirit chi, they would quickly recover. An Empyrean realm evil spirit usually had to be shattered several times before it was completely destroyed. 100,000 evil spirits. Lung Qianma frowned. She was faintly worried. Her Yaoyu ancient dynasty had 100,000 soldiers. They were all cultivators. However, these soldiers were stationed at the borders of the ancient dynasty. It was impossible for them to appear on the battlefield at the same time. 100,000 evil spirits. This time, the Yaoyu ancient dynasty was in big trouble. Have you delivered the letters that I asked you to send out? Your Majesty, they have all been delivered. However, most of the ancient clans and immortal sects gave excuses. It is obvious that they do not wish to fight against the evil spirits with the Yaoyu ancient dynasty. The female general gritted her teeth, but she was powerless. All these years, the Yaoyu ancient dynasty had suppressed the ocean state with unparalleled heavenly might. With the thoughts of these sects, they most likely wanted to see the Yaoyu fall with their own eyes. It was impossible for them to send reinforcements. Yes, gather all the soldiers in the nearby city passes. Prepare to fight to the death. Lung Qianma nodded calmly, not surprised at all. Clearly, she had already guessed the situation before her. These immortal sects and ancient clans have been suppressed by the Yaoyu ancient dynasty for tens of thousands of years. Now that they finally had a chance to overthrow the Yaoyu ancient dynasty, why would they lend a helping hand? At the end of the day, the emergence of this evil spirit had exceeded Lung Qianma's expectations. However, the saints of the Yaoyu ancient dynasty were all suppressing the evil spirit in various places. The strongest patriarch of a dynasty was guarding the imperial capital to prevent any unforeseen events. One had to know that it was very likely that some people with ulterior motives would secretly sneak into the imperial capital and stir up trouble. In fact, even in the Yaoyu ancient dynasty, there might be people who wanted to seize the opportunity to seize power. The only person she could count on was herself. Qianma. Just as Lung Qianma was pondering and her eyes were filled with fatigue, a gentle voice suddenly came from behind her. Lung Qianma frowned slightly and turned to look at the man behind her. Her eyes flashed with surprise. Chen Fan, why are you here? That's right. The young man who had appeared before her was the #1 freeloader in the 9 states, King Xiaoyao. He was also Lung Qianma's husband, Chen Fan. His appearance could not be considered handsome. It was just extremely ordinary. He was the type that would not attract attention at all in a crowd. The outside world had many guesses about the reason for their marriage. However, no matter how they guessed, the world still could not figure out why the Empress of Ocean State would marry such a useless person. In fact, Lung Qianma had no choice but to choose Chen Fan as her husband. Many lords and ministers of the Yaoyu ancient dynasty had been persuading Lung Qianma to not have an heir. Because of this, the patriarch had even chosen several young talents for her to choose from. However, those people all had their own motives. Once Lung Qianma married them, she would have to be wary of them. Therefore, In the end, she had chosen this scholar who was traveling around the imperial capital. A person with no cultivation and no background would not be a pawn in someone else's hands. She did not need to be distracted and could just live peacefully with him. I heard that Shuhai City was in an emergency, so I came over. Chun Fan was wearing a white robe. His smile was clean, and there was calmness in his eyes. In this year, he had not had any physical contact with Lung Qianma, but in Chun Fan's eyes, he and Lung Qianma were a true married couple. This was undeniable. Even though the Empress had often warned him not to have any improper thoughts, Chun Fan was gradually moved by this domineering and simple woman. Is this a place you should come to? Do you think I'm not tired enough? Lung Qianma snorted, dissatisfaction in her voice. She had no feelings for Chun Fan at all. It was just an excuse to shut the mouths of the ministers and the patriarch. Moreover, in Lung Qianma's eyes, his action of staying by her side was really childish. On the path to immortality, the winner takes all. How could she be touched? Don't worry. But what shocked Lung Qianma was that Chun Fan was no longer as timid and restrained as he used to be. He walked to her side calmly and looked at the mountains and seas in the distance. If darkness falls, I will stand in front of you and kill until dawn. What? Lung Qianma's beautiful eyes narrowed. A trace of surprise appeared on her flawless face for the first time. She seemed to feel that Chun Fan was very different today. It was as if he was the real him now. No one could see through him. Didn't I make myself clear? Chun Fan smiled brightly and turned to look at the beautiful face close to him. Nothing in this world can hurt you, evil spirits or demons, because I won't allow it. What's wrong with you? Lung Qianma took a deep breath. She clearly did not feel any energy fluctuation from Chun Fan, but there was an inexplicable sense of respect. Nothing. I just wanted to live a carefree life and ignore the conflicts of the world. But you changed my mind in the end. Chapter 1475. Chun Fan, are you hiding something from me? Lung Qianma's tone wasn't as indifferent as before. She thought she could only count on herself. But Chun Fan's words made her think otherwise. Could it be that she misjudged him? Had this useless husband, who was usually sloppy, been hiding his strength? No, I just don't want you to be so tired. Chun Fan shook his head and let out a mysterious smile. That's right. Just as Ling Xiao had guessed, his strength wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. He used to be a creature that stood at the top of the 9 heavens. Back then, his body was shattered and all his cultivation was destroyed. But a strand of his divine soul accidentally escaped and entered Chun Fan's body, becoming an immortal mortal. But a year ago, he'd gotten a treasure by chance and awakened his memories. He'd gradually recovered his strength. Although his body couldn't cultivate spirit chi, it didn't mean his combat power was weak. On the contrary, ordinary saints were nothing in his eyes. Chun Fan had planned to wait until he got the real creation of this world before telling Lung Qianma his identity. However, this sudden turn of events forced him to change his plans, because in his heart, Lung Qianma was already his wife. He wouldn't watch her die in the hands of the evil spirits. Oh, Lung Qianma was skeptical, but she still had a glimmer of hope. Boom! Suddenly, a shocking death chi appeared in the forest in the distance. Vaguely, there seemed to be countless evil figures standing under the envelopment of this deathly aura. Lung Qianma narrowed her eyes and said coldly, "They're finally here?" The entire Shuhai city fell into chaos. Countless armored guards walked up the city wall and stood behind Lung Qianma respectfully. But when they saw the figure standing side by side with Lung Qianma, shock appeared on everyone's faces. Unfettered king? Why was this piece of trash here? Emperor, we've discovered an army of evil spirits ahead. They're gathering in Shuhai City. In the distant void, a woman dressed in black stepped down from the sky and bowed in respect. Get ready to fight to the death. Lung Qianma nodded indifferently. Her eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Shuhai City was the first and only barrier of the Yao Yu ancient dynasty. Once the city fell, the vast plains behind it would become a fertile land for the evil spirits. Therefore, in this battle, they would either die or win. Boom! The wind and clouds suddenly changed. Above the city walls, rays of spiritual light lit up like the stars in the sky. They connected to form a formation that enveloped the entire city. On the other hand, Lung Qianma stood proudly in front of everyone. Spiritual might gushed out, and she held a golden holy sword in her hand. Unlike the nervous faces of the others, Chun Fan's expression was extremely calm. Since it was an evil spirit, what was truly terrifying was not the spiritual energy of its physical body, but the aura of its divine soul that was filled with the will of death. Once a living being of flesh and blood came into contact with the death aura, they would quickly lose their minds and become a member of the evil spirit army. Until, at the end of the world, figures wrapped in death chi began to appear one after another. Lung Qianma's jade-like hand suddenly clenched the holy sword. The battle intent in her eyes boiled. She was like a Valkyrie who wanted to punish all evil in the world. Ha ha ha! Soon, ghost chi began to appear behind the numerous ghost shadows. It was so dense that it covered the sky and earth. From afar, it looked like an ocean of death chi with surging waves. I'll kill their leader later. You guys be careful. Lung Qianma looked into the distance. Her voice was extremely cold. At this moment, she could sense that there were actually 3 saint stage powerhouses among the few ghostly figures in the lead. Among them, the strongest one was a 4th grade Saint Realm expert. Lung Qianma's combat ability was enough to fight against a 3rd level saint. But a 4th level saint wouldn't be so easy. She didn't plan on returning alive from this battle. Qianma. Just then, Chun Fan suddenly turned his head. His expression was also grave. Those saints aren't the key to this battle. Hearing Chun Fan's words, many cultivators around showed disdain and mockery. A piece of trash without a shred of spiritual energy actually dared to speak so arrogantly. Those saints aren't the key to this battle. You are, aren't you? Even Lung Qianma looked at Chun Fan in confusion. Obviously, she was surprised. These evil spirits should be controlled by someone. Chun Fan's eyes were cold. There was no anger in them. He looked up at the mountain in the distance. Although his divine soul hadn't fully recovered, it had reached the 9th level saint. In other words, it wouldn't take much effort for him to kill a few 3rd level saints. At this moment, he could feel that there was a thin and weak figure standing behind the layers of death aura. It was him. He was controlling these evil spirit cultivators with his soul. Controlled by someone? Unfettered king, who can control 100,000 evil spirits. The female general in golden armor next to Lung Qianma narrowed her eyes. Her tone was a bit angry. The battle was imminent. He should be punished for deceiving people with lies. If Ocean State really had an overlord who could control 100,000 evil spirits, even if all the overlords of 9 states came, they wouldn't be able to do anything, let alone the Yaoyu ancient dynasty. 100,000 evil spirits. How terrifying would the divine soul power be? Maybe he's not from 9 states. Chun Fan ignored the general in golden armor. He was thinking about how to get past the 100,000 evil spirits and get rid of the culprit. Not for 9 states. Lung Qianma frowned. She immediately understood what Chun Fan meant. The gate of the upper world had been opened. During this time, countless talents from the upper world had come to the world of dead spirits to search for secret lands. Ocean State was at the edge of 9 states and adjacent to the Netherworld Sea, so no one paid attention to it. Even so, Lung Qianma still heard a lot of rumors. For example, an array formation talent had almost defeated all the sects in Azure State. Wherever he went, all the elites died. 3 beautiful women with transcendent temperaments, yet they were engaged in the shady business of robbing sections. Now, no matter which sect it was, upon seeing the 3 women, they would take the initiative to offer up their spiritual treasures to ensure that their sects would not be defeated. Of course, the most famous one was a young lord called Ling Xiao. It was said that this person was extremely powerful and handsome. He not only killed thousands of demons in Yun State, but also destroyed the Blood Feather race, one of the three divine races, by himself. It was hard not to yearn for such a powerful and righteous young lord. Chinma, do you believe me? Inexplicably, Chun Fan's face lit up with love. Lung Chinma was obviously stunned for a second and felt a bit uncomfortable. What do you want to say? I'm here to kill the mastermind, but you have to cooperate with me. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.